So
All right. Good morning. This is Jill Ekus. I am the Community Development Director for the City of Half Moon Bay. Welcome to the July 16th, 2020 Architectural Advisory Committee meeting. Our Architectural Advisory Committee is happy to have participants here today. This is our first meeting on Zoom, and we appreciate your patience. A few things are not working the way that they have in the past with our great experience that we've had with the Planning Commission, and we'll try to shake that out. And so just before we really dive in, we'll try to be patient with each other, as you just saw Bridget coaching us all through, and make sure that everyone has a productive experience, sees what they need to see, has a chance to participate, and that the committee is given the opportunity to do what they've been appointed to do. I have a few background notes before we jump in. Our Architectural Advisory Committee is a council-appointed committee. They are advisory to the City Council, the Planning Commission, and city staff. They're a very important role to play in our review process. They are not an approval body. They are not reviewing for the sake of approving or denying a permit. However, their review will be recorded to a high level of detail by staff. Throughout this meeting today, you'll see Scott Phillips, who's the staff liaison to the committee, Bridget Jett, who is our planning analyst, and Scott is one of our planners also. He's an associate planner here. And I will as well be taking copious notes. And one of the things that we like to do at the end is make sure that we have clearly heard the direction from the committee, and we will ask them for confirmation of that. The committee does not have a chair, and that has worked well for us. Usually these meetings are in a conference room, seated around a table with plans on the table and participants collaborating in discussions about design. This project today has clearly a lot of interest, and we just will have a little bit of a different format in terms of structuring the steps for this meeting. After my introduction, we will move over and give the applicant an opportunity to spend time presenting the project in whole. After that, the architectural committee members will have a chance to ask clarifying questions. This is not time for them to give input. It will be their opportunity to simply ask the project architect if there was something that wasn't clear in the presentation, or they want to double check on perhaps a dimension or a material or some component about the design intent that was presented. This is an important part of the understanding of the proposal, and the intent is for everyone who's participating to hear these clarifying questions and answers, so that when we move to the next step, which will be our public comment phase, everyone is as informed as possible about the project design that's being presented. We will take public comment today similarly to how it's done with City Council or Planning Commission. We'll have a 3-minute time period for each speaker. Bridget will instruct and move folks into the panel, and make sure you're unmuted and have your time to make your comments. I just want to make a note, though, it's important if you have questions, or you're wanting to engage in dialogue with either the architect or the committee, they're not able to do that. But what we'll do is, again, record your input, and then as questions come about, we will keep track of them. And if there are things that can be answered today during the meeting, we'll make sure that either the architect or staff can have the opportunity to do that so that you can hear those answers. And if we can't answer those questions today, we'll make sure that there's a way to get back to everyone so that you know that information. Now, I'm not going to present anything about the project at this point other than to acknowledge the location of the project and a few project details that are noted in the agenda, and to reflect for a moment on the purpose of this meeting, the purpose of the design review meeting. So this is an application for a Hyatt hotel project at the location of Main Street, Highway 1 and Higgins Canyon Road. It's approximately 5-acre property at the south end of the city's downtown. It's a triangular shaped parcel. And we've been receiving actually quite a bit of public emails on this that Bridget has conveyed to the committee. And I've noted a number of community members have described the site as a gateway. And staff agrees, as well as do our various documents, that this is a gateway site, and it's an important consideration for the design review committee in looking at this project. There was quite a staff report, and a lot of materials are on the website for this project, and they were available back in March. We intended to have this meeting in person at the library, where we would have had a lot of room and been able to really have a different kind of experience. We're going to replicate that to the extent that we can. This is a real opportunity for people to participate in design review, which is not something typical. Most of us are used to planning commission and city council meetings as participants in those, but to really have input into and then observe what is really a working session of these design professionals who represent construction, architecture, and landscape architecture for a diverse panel of committee professionals. Those are the key points. There was one other thing that came clear, and it's been something of note throughout public comment on this. We want to make very clear that this is not a city property or a city project. This is a private property, and it has commercial zoning. It's in a planned development designation for the land use plan, and it has been in this designation for many years, and this designation allows for commercial development. So I've received some emails that are questioning why staff is bringing this project forward, and staff is processing this entitlement review process. That is our role, and the role of the public is to participate, which is why we're so glad you're here. And the design review is embedded in the overall work that is being done to review these entitlements through environmental review. An environmental impact report is nearing completion, and that will be the work of the Planning Commission to review both the project and alternatives to the project with respect to environmental review. Aesthetics is one of those topics, so that is a very strong link between what the committee is going to be doing today, the community's input today, and what the Planning Commission will then hear. We will convey everything from this meeting to the Planning Commission. I will stop here and note that at the end of this meeting, we'll have a slide with contact information and next steps and dates to make sure that folks have what they need to know for anything that's going to be going forward to the Planning Commission and the timing for that, as well as for this committee, and details such as story polls, which will be installed for this proposal at a future point. This is the first time that the Architectural Advisory Committee has seen this project. it is being introduced to them. The committee was seated in 2019 after this project had already been presented to the Planning Commission a number of times. So we see this as a very in-depth orientation of this project to the committee. One other note, when the committee has their turn to discuss the project, which will be after public comment, we will ask each committee member just to make sure that they acknowledge if they've had any ex parte communication about this project with the applicant. And thank you for bearing with that long opening, and we will now turn it over to the project applicant's architect. Peter Mason is here, and he will be sharing his screen and his, he will have a presentation on the order of 15 to 20 minutes for this project. Thank you.
Just before he starts, Jill, I just wanted to open up public comment for anyone who might have a comment about something else, not regarding this project. I just lost my screen. Hold on, because there's talking. Hold on. I'm going to stop your participation for just a second and see if I can see anybody who's raising their hands for just one moment. Sorry, Peter. Apologize. I do have Dave Shore. Did you want to speak on something not related to the project?
No.
Okay, just saw your hand raised and I just wanted to acknowledge that before we get started. Okay, thank you. Anyone else have anything besides? Okay, I just want to make sure. Nope, I don't see anyone. Okay, sorry about that interruption. And Peter, you can go ahead and share and go for that.
Okay, my name is Peter Mason. I'm the architect for the Hyatt Place project. We've been on board for probably a year and a half or so. When we first started on this project, we really looked at how important this site is to the city of Half Moon Bay. It definitely is part of the southern gateway, and we wanted to make sure that we dealt with the site, which has its own constraints, in a way that was adding to the southern end of the city, and making it a part of the city and really a gateway to it. So what we were looking at was really what is Half Moon Bay and how can this project architecturally and site plan wise fit into the city. So we looked at a bunch of what our goals are, which are here, and given the time constraints, I think that's it's something that everybody can look at and deal with. Our design approach really is to really reflect the Half Moon Bay coastal agricultural heritage. And from an architectural standpoint, we want to reduce the building massing. And I'll talk about how we did that. We're also very sensitive to the Southern Gateway location and how this project is presented and fits with it. And we want to enhance the natural resources of the site. There's a wetlands that's along Highway 1 that's really a controlling site plan issue as well that we can discuss. And we really want to have a sustainable project. So what we're trying to do is carry forward the heritage of Half Moon Bay, agricultural heritage of barns and greenhouses and really spectacular open space. The site itself is the triangular site that Jill mentioned here. This is
Can you? You're not sharing anymore.
I'm not what?
Sharing your screen.
I'm not. Oh.
No, go back down and.
I thought I did.
You did earlier, but then I had to shut it down for public comment. But you should be able to share now.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that.
It's not coming up for some reason.
It's a mess.
There you go.
There we go.
Yeah, just give it a sec, but there we are.
So going back, I mean, these pictures are starting to, invoke what we're trying to do architecturally. And then we're really sensitive to the South Gateway, but we're also trying to figure out ways that we can reduce the mass of the project, of the building massing, by providing ways through the project that you can see through towards the hills beyond. The Southern Gateway entrance is down here at this end. James Ford is down here at that end, which is here. Sustainability is a big part of it. So as we were developing the site, what we looked at was how can we include a bike path within the zone of the wetlands, as well as pedestrian access and bicycle access as well. As you can see here, this is the extent of the wetland setbacks, and is dedicated open, and it's basically going to become dedicated open space. There's a series of setbacks here, and these are the architectural setbacks for buildings and site improvements.
Bridget, this is Linda. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I have nothing on my screen. I've lost it. It keeps crashing. I can't see any. I've tried to relaunch again, and it's not working. So just letting you know. I mean, I have the packet and I can hear, but I can't see anything.
Okay. We may be able to send a copy of it over to you so you could view it. Just go ahead and continue, Peter, and then I can try to, maybe we could forward it over to her as well or something, and I can try to.
She says she has a packet, so I think she can just probably follow the packet.
I think I can. I mean, I'm used to doing that.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Okay. This drawing was updated, and I think Bridget put this on the website in order to show what the distances are of the building from both the property line along Highway 1 and the driving surface, the edge of the drive lane, to what the setbacks are along there. And then we've done a series of them along the back side and the side in terms of what the setbacks of the buildings are. And we can go through those in detail if there's any questions. The whole idea here was to create this end on the left-hand side as really the big barn, and create it as such that you came in and you had a real feel for this being unique and different. And as you came along Highway 1, it was the first thing that you'd see, and the rest of it recedes back. Because of the setbacks that we had before, the building is really tied to pretty much this zone. So what we wanted to do from Highway 1 was to make sure that what we were showing was a continuation of the open space that's across the road in front of the hotel, and it becomes a public pathway through for both bikes and pedestrians. And then the buildings form a series of buildings and are broken down mass-wise and hide the parking from Highway 1, which an earlier scheme had a lot of parking down at this end, which we didn't think was the right approach. Architecturally, what we're trying to do is really create a sort of modern barn idea where it fits with the rural and agricultural nature of it. And then as well, trying to bring in elements of glazing and the greenhouses. So between buildings, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make everything as transparent as possible. The pool area is going to be covered. It's going to be covered, and we'll have a greenhouse effect. And the buildings are, basic materials are stone, a board and batten in various forms, some stucco, and then metal. I turned off the switch now. And then, as part of in sustainability, there's going to be solar collectors as well on the roofs. These are some sort of updates of the materials and the options within that. But these give you an idea of where the elements, how the elements fit. So what we try to do is break down the roofs, roof forms, so that the main eave is down at the 2-story level, and the upper level has a different type of guest room to allow for the breakup of the buildings even further. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to break between, we're trying to leave a big open space where the swimming pool is, that looks back towards the hills, and use the variety of materials in such a way that it breaks up the massing of the buildings themselves by material. On the buildings at the end, where this is the ballroom, there's a kitchen in this zone, there's meeting space and that kind of stuff, and this is the entrance. And then it goes off to the buildings themselves. Okay, plan-wise, you enter off of Main Street, and there's a porte cochere area where you drop off. You look through this. This is very much all glass and you look out towards the wetlands that run all the way across the front of the property. Off to the left-hand side is the meeting room, which is about 2,700 square feet. The breakout areas and the in-house dining for buffets and that kind of stuff for this style of hotel. And the guest rooms are broken into basically 3 wings. Where you go between, again, this is another glass element for the pool. Some of the back of house items like the laundry and some of the executive offices, the housekeeping and that kind of stuff are over on this side, plus a little bit of the mechanical. All the mechanical is within the roof forms. So the second floor, we've really tried to keep this zone in between for the pool as open as possible. So we're not connecting there's basically these 2 portions are not connected to the other building along the northern part of the site. And then these are the rooms that are within the roof. So what we've done here is we've done sort of elongated room by putting the bathrooms off to the side, and then these become the elements that form the roof elements that allow for the diversity of the roof forms. So these are the 2 long elevations. So this is the elevation of Main Street. And again, this is the public areas of the hotel, and some of the back of house kitchen areas. The meeting room is here. The second floor, this is a restaurant that overlooks the open space across the road. This is the entry welcoming building. And then the guest rooms, the pool, and the north wing. Same thing on this side. So this is the side that faces faces Highway 1. And then this is the gateway elevation. So what we've done here is we've tried to get this to be very much the barn building, sort of a modern barn. And then the wing in the back sets back. And these are enlarged elevations that give you an idea of the massing and the materials. The colors are a little bit off, but the idea is how to break them down. So what we're trying to do is these are the balconies out in front of the guest rooms. There's a base to the building that incorporates these elements. And then this is the 2-story roof start here. And then these are those special guest rooms up at the top. And then these are the zones in between where you can see through. These are some renderings of what you see. So as you come along Main Street, what we're trying to do is, again, invoke the architectural vernacular of the greenhouse as you enter into the building. The restaurant's up here on the top floor of that building, and then this is lobby, and then the guest rooms themselves. This is a little bit further up the street as you approach the project. The ballroom or meeting space and pre-function is really very much what we're trying to do to invoke a barn, as it is a barn experience. And then this is the restaurant that overlooks the wetlands and then the open space across the back. So this is really the view from the southern gateway. These are existing photos of the existing site and some sections that go through. So we've been very careful to fit everything within the 2-story with a 2-story base and then the roof elements up above, all of which are below the 35 feet maximum height in the planning documents. Landscape-wise, basically the project it's got 6 different planting zones. The wetlands is one, and we're bringing on board as part of the design a expert on the wetlands and the plants that can go in it. And then there's the bike path, which forms a buffer to the wetlands, the west side of the project, and the parking areas and how we deal with those, as well as the planting buffer to the north. So on this page, what we've tried to do is give a description of what each one of the landscape areas are, what the buffers are like and what's in them. And then more of the planting, and really trying to have the planting be part of what is naturally in Half Moon Bay. So along the edge, there's the bike path. This whole zone is the wetlands. So there's a buffer area to that, which is another pedestrian walking path. This end here is very much part of the gateway as you come in. And then along Main Street, where there's already, very, very mature trees along that edge. So what we're trying to do is backfill underneath it to create an environment which one screens the parking area, but also is a nice walking sidewalk along that whole side. Stormwater obviously has to be dealt with in terms of how you deal with it. So that's part of the design. And that's pretty much everything. Is there any questions?
Peter, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Chad Hooker. You've got standing seam metal roofing, which is a pretty contemporary material, but characteristic on a lot of barns and rustic structures. The more contemporary material has a very hard sort of square rib. And I see that you've also got a solar film, which is this isn't a material that's known to me. I'm trying to figure out how that's going to work, and if that
So
how it adheres to the roof.
Yeah. So as we've gotten into it a little bit more, what we've decided is that really the solar is really only going to go on the very top surfaces, which are not as visible. And we've been looking at the Tesla ones, where it's the whole surface rather than just something between the ribs. There are ones that go between the ribs, which are good, but we think the Tesla ones may be better as basically creating a single surface and not trying to get into, trying to replicate the metal roof on those sections.
So you mean the top of the highest dormers would have something that would be like a Tesla shingle, not a standing silver?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So
these roofs would remain as a metal roof, and then the top ones up here would be in certain areas. I'm not sure we would necessarily put it on this surface over here, for example, because it's a little bit too notice, too prominent for it. But I think these ones along this side, on both sides, would be a good place for them.
And that would give you adequate area to have an impact?
Yes. Yes. The Tesla ones are probably one of the highest efficiencies.
And they're available? They're actually manufactured now?
Yes, and they've actually been installing them. So there was a period when they hadn't.
Okay, so then there's not really composition shingle anywhere. It's either standing seam metal roofing or the Tesla shingle.
Yes, there's some areas where one of the things we're trying to resolve is how to break the building down further in terms of the materiality of it and allow for a little bit of differentiation between areas. There may be composition roof or something like what's on the one of the image boards that we had, to something that breaks it down a little bit so that all the buildings aren't just a continuation of the total amount of the same material.
Right, I think that's a really valid concept in terms of your design, is to switch up the materials from one structure to another, because that
Absolutely.
Plus the open, glass spaces between them could help it not look like such a massive development.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So we're at the point of the meeting for any other clarifying questions from our Architectural Advisory Committee members. We just received some more information clarifying the roofing materials. Are there any other clarifying questions from Member Hooker or Mr. Kikuchi or Linda Poncini before we move over to our community comment time?
Yes, I have a question. On page 3 of your presentation, you have the one item number 2 where you're trying to reduce the building massing, and you show view corridors between the buildings.
Yes.
With mostly glass structures. Can you explain that concept in greater detail and how that will be achieved with the glass?
Yes. So one of the things we've done on the top floor of the zone in between here is we're actually leaving it open. So it's an outdoor walkway between those 2 floors. And partially what that's doing is it's accentuating the zone in between. Let me get up. So we've dropped this one down, and the idea here is that these are all glass. There's no solids to it, because there's basically the structural of the floors, but the glass is very much all glass. So you're going to see through that as a narrow corridor. And that allows for, even down here where, we're trying to get and see through here, we're trying to see through where the pool area is. So it's sort of, it's a lot like the greenhouses in between.
What's the, between, on the guest building number 1, what's the approximate space between those two buildings?
Here?
Yeah.
It's 16 to 18 feet.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So this is Linda. I had a question about the materials that you're on this elevation. Could you describe the materials on the meeting room again, please, on this?
Yes. This whole end here is all recycled wood. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it like it's like it's the old barn. And then the materials in this zone are a combination of siding, horizontal and vertical siding, as well as a lot of glass. So this side is really as open as we can make it. This building also has the recycled board and batten type materials. The hotel itself is made up of stucco, particularly at the base, a vertical board and batten in the middle, except for where the balconies are, which is all stucco. And then the top is a horizontal siding. And that's pretty typical around the building. There are zones where, these don't weed quite enough, but there's some zones where, the board and batten or the horizontal siding comes all the way down on the surfaces to break up the massing.
So, yeah, my question was, if you can go back to that sheet, yes, thank you, to that east elevation of the meeting room. Those white elements, to me.
These are stucco.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And then this is siding. This is siding. This is siding as well. And then this is board and batten up atop. So this is a horizontal siding with screen elements on to break up the massing. And this is really a back of house corridor. So what we're trying to do is break the height down a little bit.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Are there any more clarifying questions? We have a nice room full of attendees here who we are aware that one has a brief PowerPoint presentation that Bridget will assist with. We'll probably need to do that one at kind of midway through. Is it time, committee, to move into public comment?
Okay with me.
All right. Very good. Okay, Bridget, can you please help us out with getting the public comment going?
Yes, so everyone will have 3 minutes to speak. And if you would be so kind to raise your hand, I can allow you guys to speak. Going once. Going twice. I have, okay, we do have Roy Salome. Let me just open him up. Oop.
Do you hear me?
Oh, wait, hold on a second.
Testing.
Okay.
1, 2,
Yep.
3.
Right, you're live. We can hear you. Go for it.
Okay, great. I see, Peter, I see your attempt at, or excuse me, I see your acknowledgement of what the surfaces of old barns and some of the existing structures that we have on the coast side, and you're trying to reference those. My concern is about the level of glass and metal trim that you're using in this structure. I've seen the old Ocean Colony pool, which uses extensive glass and metal, and the Zabala house trim, and also the trim at Shoreline Station. And this is a tough environment, and the metal and glass has a real rough time here. So I was wondering if you could comment on how these materials, the materials that we have today, as far as metal and glass, will age. And have you given any thought to choosing materials that will age gracefully over time? Thank you.
So we'll save those questions for the end. We don't have dialogue at this point, but
those are certainly questions that we can
make sure the architect addresses.
Thank you.
Through public comment. Thank you. Did you have any more? Or are you through?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I meant to just
That's
put
okay.
them on.
We don't have a lot of speakers, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah. Are you? Any other comments, Roy?
No, thank you. That's it for now. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
And the next person I have is Dave Shore. And let me just, okay, so you can talk, David. I'm going to pull up what you would like me to pull up. So hold on.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. So whenever you're ready, I'm assuming you can see a screen on your end. So I will just let me cue you, or you can cue me.
Yeah, if you just want to roll that as a slideshow, that's fine. I'll just talk over it.
Okay.
And I'll wait till you've got that rolling, so we're sure that the technology is up and running. Or just keep hitting next every 5 or 10 seconds, whatever works for you.
All right. You can go ahead. I'm going to just keep going.
Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to comment, and thank you to the architects for doing the work that you've been doing. A building doesn't exist just on paper or all by itself. It exists in an environment, in a setting that's intrinsic to this design process. And this 5-acre parcel is indeed the south gateway to town, as has been noted. Though zoned commercial, it's historically been farmed, and literally for generations, it has formed the gateway view to Half Moon Bay, whether it was planted in pumpkins, corn, or artichokes, frequently pumpkins. I remember driving up there many times and just assuming it was a chunk of farmland. That really is the identity, the image, and the brand of Half Moon Bay. That is the gateway. This represents a project of this size, irrespective of the design elements, represents a massive change in the appearance of that chunk of town. What the applicant would like you as the Architectural Advisory Committee to do is to literally get lost in the weeds of discussing exactly what I hear: siding, reflectivity, glass trim, color palette. And nobody has yet raised the issue that this complex of buildings stretches for approximately 650 feet along Highway 1 and will be visible as a 650-foot long, 30 to 35-foot high series of structures to everybody entering and leaving town from multiple angles, as these renderings based on the architect's own drawings are showing. Those are the visual changes that will occur. To me, if you guys spend the next 2 hours discussing color palette and glass versus wood versus concrete versus stucco, it's literally spending your time discussing the color of the deck chairs on the Titanic. The big issue here is the size of this project. The applicant wants 129 rooms plus a 2,700 square foot conference center. That is simply incompatible with the general plan update primary goal number 1 of preserve small town charm and character of Half Moon Bay. You can't have small town charm and character and a 650-foot long, 30 to 35-foot high, 129 room complex for a hotel. you just can't do it. This size project is inappropriate for this site. I would hope that the committee will spend a significant amount of time discussing the application of this large project to the site and not so much time on the details of color and whatnot. It would be a disservice to the public to do otherwise. And thank you for your time.
Bridget, I don't see anyone else who wishes to speak. This is the time to raise your hand if you'd like to participate.
I have one person, and I'd like them to, if you could state your first and last name for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Vasa Endicott.
Okay.
VASA. And, you know, this is kind of an unfamiliar world to me, but I would like to just offer an echo to Dave Shore's concerns about the size of this project. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? I don't have anyone else.
Okay. Very good. You're seeing us take little pauses because we're trying to capture comments. We're typing as we go, and just context as we move from this public comment period, which we're going to go ahead and close now. And thank you. We know there are a lot of additional folks here in the room who are participating as observers, either through the Zoom call or through the PCTV production of this. So we appreciate that very much. And at the end of this meeting, you will see contact information with city staff. So the committee has heard some comments about durability of project materials in the environment here, the coastal setting. This is something the committee has talked about a lot. And of course, you just heard two comments about the context of the project in the city, the size of the project, and that relationship. And that is absolutely in the purview of the committee. Before you begin your discussion, though, I thought it would be helpful to attendees to understand a little bit about the environmental review process. The environmental review process is evaluating the project, which is defined as what you have seen here presented. This is the applicant's project. The environmental review process will also consider project alternatives. Project alternatives always include a no project alternative, as well as a reduced project alternative. And so different components of the Architectural Advisory Committee's input about massing and sight lines, et cetera, will be considered for alternate project options that will be looked at in the environmental impact report. Because this was the initial meeting for the committee to get to know this project, we have not produced all of the materials yet. They're not all complete. But one thing that the city is preparing independently from the applicant, this is something that our environmental review consultants are preparing on behalf of the city for public review for the Architectural Advisory Committee and for the Planning Commission, are visual simulations that will be ready in probably a few weeks for public consideration and will be brought back to this group. And they will also coincide with the installation of story poles. So there'll be a lot more information for this committee in terms of massing at that point in time. They are, however, I want to say, they're all skilled design professionals, and they do understand the scale of the site and how it will sit in that particular location. So we appreciate that input, and I just want to reassure everybody that there will be more information And I'm sure that the committee is thinking in the context of character and scale along with details. And with that, it's time for the committee to spend some time giving us some input. Of course, we did have that specific question to the architect about I think metal elements in particular and durability of some of the materials that were presented. And if you wanted to give a little more information about that before the committee begins, that would be helpful.
This is Linda. I just wanted to be sure you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. My screen keeps crashing, and I have to keep, rejoining the meeting, and I can't see all of the microphones and that, so I wasn't sure if I was muted. Thank you.
Yeah, you're good.
All right. Well, I will make a couple of initial comments. I think that I'm concerned with the massing of the overall project. I think that these concept photos of the inspirational photos that are on the early pages, page 8, some on page 9. These are very nice images, and the scale of these buildings that were used as inspiration, the scale is very nice. And the reason they look so nice is that they are small. When you look at these elements, most of them are 1 story. The ones that have a little higher element that is maybe a pop-up on a 2-story. There is just a 2-story pop-up on a 1-story building. And I think that this scale does remind you of farm buildings. Barns, yes, barns are large, but other buildings on farms are usually pretty small. And so the sense that if this could be a cluster of small buildings as opposed to a large building mass that is linked by what is shown as glass, may not be all that easy to see through it. I really think that somehow you need to bring this scale, especially what you're showing on page 8, into this design. And if it could feel like a little group of cottages, I think it would feel better. And that's just my first overall take on this, that the images have very nice materials, and yes, it feels very rural and it feels very coastal on the images, but I think we're not there yet on the building. That's my overall.
Anyone else?
My comment in that regard would be that as the aerial view the architect put up shows, the surrounding land uses, including the fire station and the theater across Main Street and the Ford dealership to the north, could all handle some screening in terms of this gateway approach to town. And I do think that the glass separation between the buildings is very helpful in separating them and in making it so you see the sight lines are better as you see through that. Obviously, as you're driving on Highway 1 at 40 or 50 miles an hour, that's essentially superfluous. The approach from the south, the buildings are quite large. I have noticed in today's presentation that Peter's talking about the third level of guest rooms remaining in the project, although we have seen a revision to that shows the third level guest rooms deleted. I think it reduces the room count by about 17, and the dormers come down somewhat. Then you've got 2 stories of windows rather than 3 stories of windows in the elevations, and that helps, but the buildings still are quite large. The opposite side of that argument, of course, is that they are well set back from the highway, and this is commercial zoning that's intended to accommodate this sort of commercial use. And this is not a zoning hearing. We're not here to try to figure out whether this building should be allowed, but rather how it should be scaled. It may be feasible to reduce the size of the buildings somewhat for either more space between them or a little less height, but as far as story hotel on the site, I think this is pretty well managed, and I'm impressed with fitting it into all of the setbacks and ecological requirements on the site. It's difficult to develop a site with that much wetland and setback requirement and still accomplish anything that's remotely viable. I don't question the appropriateness of having a hotel on the site when the changes to the view shed are screening other structures that in some cases could use some screening. So that would be my comment.
Yes, I think I share some of the common concerns about massing. My question regarding the glass openings between the buildings was because I'm not absolutely convinced that a glass opening actually presents a feeling of openness. It's still going to reflect. It's still going to have framing, so it's going to have a certain amount of massing, even if it's a glass structure. I'm a big concern with what Chad also mentioned about the 16 to 18 foot space between the one building, and if that really is providing an opening between a couple 35 foot tall buildings, if that really does, if that is successful. I think always the biggest challenge on any project, especially in Half Moon Bay, is any project is increasing building mass, and the opinion of almost everybody in town is smaller the better. And I think finding that compromise is going to be very challenging. And that being said, I think the smaller or the more in-scale buildings you can make is going to be something that sits better with the community. I do have also a concern about the third story. I recall when the fire station training tower was built, there was a lot of controversy, a lot of back and forth on the height of that. And that building itself is a very small building compared to the total amount of buildings that you're building. And I know a big concern was the view off Highway 1 southbound as you look towards the hills out there. And so I think there is a lot of community acknowledgement of preserving that view of the hills. I'm not sure. I think that the massing model that was presented by the one citizen, I'm not sure if that is 100% accurate or not. I think there are some difficulties in a model like that because they are just big white masses that don't show articulation or shadows or colors. So I think the impact is always stronger in a model like that. But I would want to see a more accurate representation of that, some type of model that is actually verified so that we really do. And I'm not sure if the story poles are going to be able to achieve that. And then in regards to landscape, I think something to really consider as you get into more detail on that is to consider what is happening across the way on the Wavecrest property, which is essentially a field that grows oat hay and has a very much of a pasture-like effect, and which is going to be in that state in perpetuity, as far as I know. And I think it would, and then the new median islands on Highway 1 are going to try to pick up on that image as well. So I think it would make sense to, if you are going to do more of a natural native type plantings, to try and pick up on that concept and that mode as you transition through your different zones towards the hotel. And I think some of your representations on your sheet showed more detailed, a high variety of plantings as you transition towards the hotel. And I think that maybe just really kind of trying to project that more pasture-like atmosphere across Highway 1 is going to be important. And I also think that the more trees that you can add that buffer the hotels from the visibility off Highway 1 is going to be important too. I know the hotel probably wants to have visibility and they want to preserve views in the western direction, but I think a compromise is going to be finding that right amount of vegetation that actually hides them so they don't have that physical presence or impact to not only the tourists, but also the residents. Thank you.
I'd like to comment a little on what Steve just said. Steve, are you feeling like the color renderings that the architect has done and also the elevations are perhaps inaccurate because there's such a difference between those and the all-white renderings that Dave Shore put up? Or are you feeling like we would need some other presentation of that to accurately reflect what's designed there?
Yeah, well, I think the one by Mr. Shore was more of an overlay on top of a Google Street View, and I'm not sure what the architectural rendering is. I think there was a claim made that it is inaccurate. So I it's in our current state of the world, there's different claims that are being made all the time. And I think we'd like to just verify what is accurate, and have somebody stand behind that. And, maybe we have to wait for the story poles to be put up to make that determination. And if the story poles are put up, maybe there's a story pole line that's put up for the 3-story structure and then also a 2-story structure in there, so we can see the difference between the two. Mm-hmm. That does bring up one of my concerns is the overall height of the structure.
I would point out that I think if you built a 1-story structure there, it would still affect the views from the highway. The comments you made about the fire tower that was initially proposed to be more than 50 feet high, and I think they reduced it to 44. These structures are under 36. And still, as you say, much, much larger structures. The massing is difficult to overcome with those, I would call them short or brief glass separations between the buildings. But again, from Highway 1, I don't know how you take in the green foothills once you've passed the end of the fire station, whether there's any building at all on this site. It's 600 or 800 more feet along Highway 1, and then you've got development in any event. And this is zoned for commercial development, so I don't know how you do any structure on this site, no matter how small, how low, I should say, and still preserve those views of the fields behind the fire station and the hills in the background. I don't have reason to question the elevations that have been presented, but it is true that the white massing shown as an overlay on a Google shot is a very different feel of that massing than what the architect has shown. Perhaps Peter could address that when he has an opportunity. That's the comment I have.
I'm going to pop in for just a minute because the question about accuracy of visual simulations has come up a few times, and I'm going to retread just for a minute about that. The city is preparing independent visual simulations. So they will be verified by our consultants. They're based on topography, and they are modeling in the actual dimensions of the building as it would be placed on the site. And you will see those. We're not intending to confirm things that are presented to us per se. We are really focused on producing an accurate model for you to take a look at in the near future. It will be very important then when the story poles are up, you will have something to hold in your hand and go out in the field and compare to. So we want this to be accurate from two perspectives, for folks who can visualize it in the field. Some story poles, although they are incredibly helpful because they show the edges, they're also visually permeable. So it's important to see both. And so we're trying to make sure that you will have that. I do think there are a number of things that have come up for Peter Mason, the architect, who could respond to, including the public comment about meeting durability or building material durability, and as well as the conversation that you've been having about massing and placement of the building. Later in the meeting, I'm going to revisit a few things about the local coastal program, but I'll save that for later.
Jill, do you want me to respond right now or okay. So durability, in terms of the glass and the metal and that kind of stuff, the best choice is really powder coated aluminum, which weathers very well and is maintainable. The building itself, the stucco and the wood side and the wood board and batten and stuff on the guest room wings will most probably be painted and can be easily maintained. The main building, in terms of the public areas and the meeting space, will have more natural wood, which will weather, and I think it's important to have it weathered. So, does that answer your question, or does? I assume anyway. In terms of perspectives, we keep hearing the thing about how we're not accurate. The design process, the way we design things, is we work very, very early and all the way through with 3D models that are accurate to the plans. We also have it sitting on the accurate base in terms of what's there. So they're as close as we can do to what's actually there. When it's placed over a photograph, it's a little bit hard to get them to be the right scale. And I think the presentation that was made by, I think it's David, is basically, I'm not going to say it's deceptive, but it's a big white box that doesn't reflect materials. It doesn't reflect the way that the building is broken down. It's basically a big, huge sugar cube thing that doesn't have any materiality to it. And that's what we tried to show in the renderings that we presented, was how those materials affect the way the massing works and breaks down the massing. Anything else, Jill?
Well, we have, that's very helpful. Thank you. I think we should take advantage of some more time if we can, because we do have a bit more time, and there was quite a discussion about massing. You've addressed that a bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about the local coastal program for a moment, because there were some requirements about the site planning that come from that. And I had a rough start to this meeting, and I wasn't able to present that very much at all. So I'm just going to mention briefly this project site, and maybe Peter presented it, but my system wasn't working. There are wetlands along the Highway 1 frontage, and the wetland buffer per the city's certified local coastal program is 100 feet. And so the city hired a biologist with a wetland specialist who delineated those wetlands and determined the 100-foot buffer location, which is mapped. And that delineation was provided to the project architect, who then was tasked with working on aligning this project so that it stayed out of the buffer. And so there are points of the building, points of the proposed development that come up to that point, but that is one of the reasons why you're seeing the position of development on the property is in relationship to that buffer. Now, in addition to that, the project site is known and designated as the L.C. Smith Plan Development. And this is through the land use plan policies. And these policies include proposed development conditions for this plan development area. One thing that comes up a lot in Half Moon Bay is how to get permits and entitlements in plan development areas. Most PD areas require a specific plan. This one does not, probably because it is only one parcel, and it actually has fairly simple, straightforward, I should say, policy components that are really mostly about setbacks. The plan development anticipated an entry feature and a need to have a minimum development setbacks of 30 feet from the Highway 1 right-of-way. Of course, there's a lot more than that because of those wetland buffers that we just talked about. 15 feet from Main Street and 10 feet from an entry feature, which was envisioned to be located on the corner. And of course, the Half Moon Bay sculpture is there at this time, but recently the city approved a new gateway feature, which really will be constituting, for all intents and purposes, an entry feature at that location as a separate project. So the Highway 1 South intersection project is independent and moving ahead. It's a signalized intersection project that has funding. It has been already entitled with a coastal development permit as well as environmental review. And we are hoping that it will break ground this fall, is my understanding. So when we look back at the 1996 Certified Local Coastal Program for this particular plan development, it anticipated some of the things that are actually being done in and around the site, but the site itself has not changed much since the time that this was drafted. But the summary of this this policy document is that it's really meant to be a modified general commercial designation. So I hope that provides some context in terms of LCP plan conformance. The plan had a 35-foot height limit. The city's general commercial zoning designation has a 36-foot height limit, so it's very, very similar. And I know that this was all, there's a lot of detail about this that was in your staff report. There's a really good staff report that went along with this that our previous consultant prepared for us back in March. And so if there are attendees who are just focused on the plans and wondering if they can get more information, I would encourage you to read that report that accompanied this particular submittal for today. So now that I've provided a stall for more thinking, I think it'd be good to go back through. Linda, do you want to give any more input now that it's been a while since you started?
Okay. So I think that getting into a discussion about the materials, I mentioned the meeting room and that elevation that faces Main Street. My concern with that is that it's very blank. I understand that there's a lot of back of house uses there, and it can't have a lot of windows, or it can't be very transparent, but it can certainly have more interest to it. So I think that that's a design element that really needs attention, because it does face onto Main Street, and there are folks that are going to be looking at that. And I think, again, onto Main Street from the parking lot, that the residents that are right across the street from it, elements that are landscape oriented on that back side, there needs to be some very serious screening and a lot of work put into the design back there for those neighbors that are across the street opposite the main hotel buildings. But I guess my comment, I would just reiterate, is I really think these masses need to be broken up more. I know that it's difficult when you're dealing with a hotel because things do want to be connected, but I think it needs to really be looked at more as pods, little clusters, something where there is that sense of openness between the elements. And I agree with the comment that Steve had made, that this 16-foot separation glass between two building elements, which still feel quite massive and boxy, I'm not sure that's going to do it. I think there needs to be more a sense that there's real open space between the building masses, and it becomes more like small buildings that you walk among them as if you were, say, in a national park where there are buildings and there's actual space between them and you can walk through there without it being enclosed with glass or anything else. So I would just go back to saying, look at those inspirational photographs from the design booklet, that the scale really needs to be broken down. And that means a lot of in and out. It means a lot of up and down and real space between things, not a series of masses that are tied together by glass or the pool structure or that type of thing. I think it really needs space between the buildings. And I think until there is a good massing of these structures, we could talk about, the color of the stone for days, and it doesn't matter if the massing isn't good. So I think it really needs to be looked at as massing that's broken down a lot more.
Linda's comments, excuse me, lead me to a question. It seems to me the effort to keep the buildings from being too tall, to bring them from 3 levels down to 2 levels, would be sort of reversed if you try to make the entire hotel into a series of smaller buildings. They would, of necessity, sort of need to be taller, and they might look quite odd. The alternative, I guess, being to reduce the room count by a significant amount. And I don't know what that means to the viability of the project. That's not the question here. But it does seem like it's either a hotel or it's a series of cottages. And I guess that would be the outstanding question for us to address here. I do have a question for Jill. It seems somewhere in my foggy memory, I think I've seen some sort of a rendering of what you refer to as the gateway feature that the city will be putting in. And I'm thinking that it has a group of trees that are on a sort of a mound of some kind. Is that right? It kind of, the elevations are raised up there. The native elevation is increased quite a bit.
The design does include berming and trees that incorporate the street trees on Main Street along the property frontage. It has signage and downlighting and the kind of landscape, a lot of native grasses and other coastal plantings. So it has a quality of kind of a drift of landscaping intended to have movement with it and a bit of elevation change. One of the criteria for that design that Planning Commission and City Council were looking for was that it could stand on its own with or without any development of the project. It needed to be independent, and if the project were to come in later, the project would need to acknowledge and be compatible with it. I do think it's important for this is a moment I've been asked to make sure that everyone acknowledges any ex parte communication. I just, Kikuchi designed to do that project for the city, the Gateway project, and Steve Kikuchi is here on the committee. He does not have a conflict associated with having done work on our Gateway project. We just want to be perfectly clear about that. It's a separate project, separate landowner, separate funding, and that was a city project. But if anyone had ex parte conversations that they need to report out about, we want to make sure we get those out before the end of the meeting. And then I also received an email that, Peter, when you were responding about durability of building materials, that you were still muted. And we wanted to give you another chance to talk about the metal elements and make sure that Mr. Salume's questions are answered while we have you all here in our Zoom.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So what I was saying was that the metal elements will be probably a powder coated aluminum, where we can play with the color and have them be durable. The buildings themselves are stucco and well, the guest room buildings are stucco and painted siding, which will be durable. And then the main building or the public areas will have a weathered siding, recycled siding that will really give a good age, will age well over time.
So, Jill, the reason I asked about the gateway feature is that again, it's not completely clear to me. Maybe Steve could clarify this. Is if there's some sort of if the elevation in the ground height is raised, if there's a mound of some sort. I'm just thinking that this issue of a southern gateway is ameliorated somewhat if, as you approach on Highway 1, you find that these structures, in whatever final configuration they wind up, are behind something that is mounded and has trees on it that will soften it some. And it would be worthwhile in terms of this EIR that the city will prepare to be sure that that view is, correctly takes in the planned rather than the existing condition for that gateway feature. Similarly, maybe we make a decision today whether that EIR, whether the renderings that the city puts together would be the version that has 3 levels of windows facing towards the west, or whether it's 2 levels of windows, depending on which of these we opt for. It sounds like the direction is to reduce massing and bringing those shed roof dormers down somewhat and getting rid of the 3rd-story windows. I'm wanting to make sure that the EIR docs prepared by the city include the right elevations. That's all.
Sure. I'm sorry I didn't answer your first question well enough. Those renderings are prepared. I understand my internet connection might be unstable. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Bridget, text me if I click out and I will call in. Thank you. Those view angles were selected some time ago, and they include looking at the project as a driver would be coming northbound towards downtown, and would include that exact gateway area that you're talking about. And so there will be materials that both the applicant has also prepared in a rendering with and without that gateway, but the city's materials will address that. Now, it did remind me that I forgot to mention a couple of things about landscaping that are really important for this project because of the wetlands and because of your design review requirements, or at least the city's requirements, your recommendations. We need to make sure that in addition to considering the structure in its setting with proposed landscaping, that you also consider it the massing without landscaping. And this is because of a Coastal Commission policy guidance document that we are obligated to follow. So when we're looking at the visual impact of development, we can't assume it will be screened. So it's an interesting thing. You know that it will be to some extent, but we have to take a look at on different components of massing, assuming that landscaping might not always be there, or that it might not be allowed to be there. There are some requirements for the wetland landscape plant materials that need to be followed. And so we'll have a little bit more of a limited ability for trees on the east side of the project site, although we have been looking at that, and it really needs to be explored with the wetland biologist who will be conferring with an architect. The Main Street side of the project does not have that constraint, and you're, I think, seeing more of a curated type of urban town style frontage with street trees and a fence that is intended to screen the appearance of the parking lot and look more like a garden wall. Those are some of the design elements that the applicant has presented to us in the past, and that those are design details that you will see as you move forward. Now, with regards to the reduced project alternative, the idea of a two-story building for one of the structures is certainly an option that we have looked at. We understand that the applicants also looked at reducing the corner buildings mass, the corner out of the gateway point. But we needed to we really needed to have this meeting happen and hear the full scope of the committee's input about massing. And we were hearing more than height. We're hearing some additional input about the size of the structures and the spacing between. And so I'm preparing my summary notes, and I'll read those off in a few minutes to make sure that we have that down. And God, I think you're also taking notes with me, and you'll make sure that we don't miss. Yeah. When Scott and I have notes that go together, we usually cover it, but we want to make sure that we understand your intent with your comments. So I'm gonna go back to my notes for a few minutes to give you one more chance to go through, and I think we can wrap up by 10:30, which was our intended end time. Bridget, I will share a screen in a little bit also with contact information on it.
Okay. Can I respond to some of Chad's questions? And just to clarify that there is a sign, the new entry sign is approximately about 8 feet tall, and there is a mound behind that in which we have trees planted. And the intent of the trees was to help add a backdrop to the signage, but also the trees are picked so that, well, to be honest, in anticipation that there could be development behind it in the future, but also trees that are not eventually going to get tall enough to block the distant El Granada hills. And while it's difficult, as you're farther away from that intersection, of course, you're going to see more of the hills. And as you get closer, the trees appears taller. And so there will be a point in time where the trees view blockage is of course greater than when you're possibly a half a mile away. But the intent was to provide a distant view of the El Granada Hills.
That helps.
And
Thank you.
my final input is that I kind of concur with what Linda said. I think the building one massing, even though it is broken in half by a glass breezeway, I just have a fear that it's going to appear as one building. And I think I'm not sure how important the breezeway being glass is, and if the buildings could be smaller. I always think back to the Asilomar development in Monterey, and how that's been a very successful development with smaller buildings and smaller separate buildings and a lot of natural landscaping between them. And I think maybe my other comment is that on building 2, maybe you can get away with having a bigger building with the 3 stories on building 2, because it is less critical as far as views off Highway 1. So those are my comments.
Yep. Thank you, Steve. This is Linda. I totally agree about the comment about Asilomar. I think Asilomar is a great example. Thank you for mentioning that.
This is a bit off subject with talking about masses and so on, but this is a subject I've brought up repeatedly over the years in Half Moon Bay, and it always seems like it's a little late in the game. So I wanted to mention to Peter at this point, all the street trees seem to ruin the sidewalks and parking lots in the surrounding areas. I can't tell if the city of Half Moon Bay has a root barrier program designed into its requirements yet, but I would strongly recommend that any trees that will be planted near asphalt or along the sidewalks should have root barriers so that we don't wind up with this tear out the sidewalks, grind the sidewalks, have heaved sidewalks program we've got all over town. Right now, there is no sidewalk there. The city spec for sidewalks does not allow rebar. So you basically put down a sheet of concrete that can go anywhere and put a tree right next to it with no root barrier, and guess what happens? So I would recommend that you give that some consideration. I don't know about landscaping. I don't know what the landscapers have in mind and in terms of what's functional in a root barrier and what's not, but I have read and seen drawings of root barriers that are purportedly very helpful in this regard. So caution. Thank you.
I want to add to that too. There are different species of trees, some that have very extensive surface roots that do lift up sidewalks, and there are actually some trees that actually do not, that have very deep-rooted roots. That, I mean, you can. A good example of a great street tree is the London plane tree that lines University Avenue in Palo Alto, and none of those trees have root barriers on them, and the trees have persisted for 40 years. So I think a lot of it is the selection of the tree. And I think another important thing with a lot of trees that are around pavement is to actually use what's called structural soil or soil. There's either structural soil or a geogrid. I guess it's a geogrid surfacing that allows air and water to penetrate the soil below a tree, that encourages tree regrowth that goes downwards as opposed to along a sidewalk. So I think none of these are street trees. I think the street trees are already established along Main Street, but that is critical also within a parking lot.
Yeah, I was commenting about the few trees that are on the perimeter of the parking lot that will also be, well, there's some, adjacent to the asphalt, obviously, but then there are others adjacent to the sidewalk that'll be put in along Main. You said that the tree in Palo Alto is a linden? That's a linden?
No, London plane tree. It's a kind of common name is a London plane tree. It's or sycamore.
Sycamore.
Acerfolia. But those trees now have to be 60 feet tall and have absolutely no root problems. And what's ironic in Palo Alto is that in the residential part of University of Palo Alto, they planted southern magnolia trees, which are just terrible. And those trees are just torn up the sidewalks and the streets on the eastern part of University Avenue. But in the downtown area, they made the right choice.
Okay, thank you.
So anything more from the committee today? Staff is prepared to give a bit of a summary and present some next steps. And I will proceed unless you chime in. Bridget, if I don't do this right, take it over from me. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, there we go. So we did all this, and this is what I would have shown you if I had been able to be with you at the beginning. Let's move on. So we also covered these items about the environmental review process and how design review connects to environmental review, and particularly our land use plan policy requirements, as well as the preparation of alternatives for the environmental impact report. So with regards to that, this is a very helpful summary of input that we've had today. In particular, the focus on massing will give us some direction to work with our applicant about a reduced project alternative and how that might lay out on the site. We heard a similar comment that when the Planning Commission looked at this some time ago, quite some time ago, the concept of the project being presented as a collection of structures relevant to the scale of architectural buildings. That seems to be consistent with some of the input that we've heard from at least a couple of you. Part of the Architectural Advisory Committee's bylaws do not require that you have consensus about everything. What we really, in fact, our Planning Commission didn't necessarily want that. They want to hear the richness of the conversation about design. And I think you put that out today. We did hear about breaking up of masses, concern that glass separation will not read as actual separation between buildings, that it might either be the buildings still too close together relative to the heights of the buildings, or that the glass itself is still going to be perceived as a solid. So we got that pretty clearly in these comments. I heard less about height specifically, other than for ensuring the views behind, which is one of our requirements of Highway 1 being a designated visual resource area, with guidance from Coastal Commission as to how we treat that. But more about massing than height. So that was interesting, but those two things obviously relate to each other. A lot of context about landscaping. We understood that well in terms of looking beyond the site, look at wave crest, look at the entry feature, consider the grade changes associated with that entry feature and how they affect the appearance of the project. Let's see. Two of you brought up a reference project, and so we will make sure that we look at that one. Typically at this point in working with our applicant on an alternative, we will try to have that prepared to enough level of detail for the sake of environmental review. It may take more time to have it ready to come back to you. Your next meeting will still have components of this proposed project if the applicant is going to continue to pursue it, but we will also need to be working on this alternative. I've got some more information though about the environmental review process up on the screen. We're wrapping up the EIR, and what happens at this point is the document will become public probably in the soonest would be in late August, I think, at this point. There's a 45-day minimum public it's a circulation period where we're seeking comments from everyone, as well as specific public agencies who will be notified that this environmental impact report is available. We typically run this period from 45 to 60 days. 60 days is a common circulation extension in the event that a document's complex. We have a public hearing during that period, which would be with the Planning Commission, and we are targeting September 22nd. We're holding that date for this project, and the Planning Commission is aware of this. So to stay involved, we hope that people have found the project page. It's on the city's website. Our Half Moon Bay website is hmbcity.com. If you go to the Community Development Department tab to planning, there's a link to current projects, and the Hyatt is listed there. There's also a way to sign up for email notifications about projects. So again, starting at the city's homepage, there's a notify me icon. If you go to notify me, you'll see a long list of different options. The city will communicate with you about all kinds of things. You can be on the email list for this project, for the Architectural Advisory Committee agendas, the Planning Commission, City Council. I recommend that everyone sign up for e-news because it's the most general and you will stay up to date. That's a weekly publication and you can opt out at any time. Our administrative assistant, Tara Hatcher, has been sitting in on this meeting, and Tara's email is there on the bottom of this slide. If you do have comments and you send them to me, I do read them and then I send them to Tara. She's assembling everything. I do want to make a note. Our email volume is extraordinary right now because we cannot have in-person meetings. So Tara will send a confirmation that we've received your comment. If you're concerned that it hasn't been received, just politely ask her if you have it. And we're sorry for any delay that we may have. We also, the city's out, I don't know why, our Outlook function was down for a while, and we have been receiving emails hours and days after they were sent to us this week. So we may have missed some of your comments if they came in the last couple of days. And we will want to make sure that we're caught up with everyone who wanted to put in a comment on the project. All the comments will be assembled and saved for sharing with the Architectural Advisory Committee if they were directed to the committee. All of those, as well as anything else on the environmental impact report, will be made available to the Planning Commission. All comments are public and we will post them on the website. So our intent is to maintain a transparent process and to hopefully have a meaningful experience in terms of what you are able to participate in, comment on through this mode. We had hoped to be able to be in-person meetings at this time, but we had no idea back in March what was ahead. So we need to get good at this. And if you have input about, if you participated and you have any input about this, please let us know. There are a few things that we cannot do. We cannot have the chat function on. We need everyone to be speaking through the public forum time. And so that is something that we cannot have in a public meeting of this nature, or an act meeting. We also must follow the webinar format. And so this has really become quite standardized with other cities. And of course, this is how we are conducting our meetings. So we're doing our best from this end, and Bridget has mastered these webinars and she's happy to take your input. But we really appreciate all the work that she did in setting it up. And I'm sorry that we're still not quite sure what happened to me today. I tried from 3 different angles and I just had some trouble. So thank you. We want to thank the applicant and the applicant's architect. There are a couple things that we conclude our meetings with. This concludes this item. On our agenda is a director's report. The only report we have for you is that your next meeting is August 20th, and there will be at least one mixed use project on the agenda, a small downtown mixed use project at the corner of Mill and Parissima should be ready for you. We also think that we're going to be able to bring back a project that you've already seen. You had input, design modifications have been made. It's the project at 795 Main Street. Scott Phillips, your liaison, is the project planner for both of those. They are both mixed use downtown developments that require your input, and then they will both be moved over to the Planning Commission for their consideration of coastal development permits. One other big deal for our director report is our land use plan is going back out for Planning Commission study session and public hearings and council public hearings. The document will be out next week. We take every chance we can to tell people about that, and hope that you will participate. We have been working on updating the public review draft that the Planning Commission had worked on for so long and for so hard. It has received a lot of public input, Planning Commission direction, and we also had Coastal Commission guidance. So the update is very detailed. We've been working diligently and dealing with a lot of meticulous items in that, as you would expect with coastal act policy. So we're looking forward to that work. That's all I have. The final item on the agenda before adjournment is if there are any committee communications, if any of the committee members have anything to share.
I do not.
Nothing from me.
And hearing nothing from committee member Kikuchi, we're going to assume that we are ready to adjourn. A little.
I think so.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, community members. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
good day.
You too. Thanks.